you guys, and welcome back to the entertainment headquarters. I am your girl, Jessica Marie, and today we're eating Popeye's chicken. I went out and I was like, I didn't know what I wanted to cook, and I didn't really feel like cooking, so I decided on buying some Popeye's chicken. So I've got some Cajun rice here, and I've got some green beans. And of course, I got my red hots because I want that for my chicken. And I got some Fango cotton candy. I got that again because I tried it last time and it was really good. I also got some of their nice buttery biscuits. And of course, the chicken. This is spicy. So let's pour the soda. Okay, beautiful clear blue, which is my favorite color to see in a beverage because it's usually bomb. Move this over. So, the movie that we're going to be reviewing today is The Talented Mr. Ripley. This is starring Matt Damon and Jude Law and Gwyneth Paltrow. Those are the main characters of the movie. So let me try some of this chicken. Very good. I haven't had Popeyes in years, I think. It's been a minute. Mm. My son is making some noises. So, the movie begins with Matt Damon. His name is Tom in the movie. Mm. So Tom is playing the piano, and it's like this little private gathering. A lot of rich folks. And so he's playing the piano for a singer who's singing. After she gets done singing, she he's approached by an older gentleman who recognizes that he's wearing the Princeton jacket. And he's like, "Oh, you might know my son, Dickie." And he tells him basically, his son is in Italy, just having a good time, not doing anything important. And he wants to see if he can meet up with him to talk to him about something. So he agrees to do that. Then Tom goes and pretty good. So, I'm sorry if you guys hear my son in the background. Wait 1 second, you guys. I'm sorry. Sorry about that, you guys. So, he basically, when he's done performing, he escorts the lady to her car, and we find out then that that is basically um his friend, and the mom and dad, who are the parents of Dickie, they think that that's his girlfriend, but they're just friends. Then you find out, as he's walking her to her car, there's a gentleman that's driving the car, and that's her boyfriend, and he's the one that went to Princeton. So basically, we're realizing that Tom didn't really go to Princeton, but he let the parents think that he did. So after that, he meets up with the dad, and the dad's like, basically, okay, wait 1 second. Sorry about that, you guys. Hopefully he's good now. Hopefully. So, I need to finish this chicken. So, he's like, will you go to Italy and bring my son back? And so Tom is like, well, I don't know. And the dad's like, well, I'll pay you $1,000. So he goes. He finds out that Dickie's into jazz, and that's what he's into. And so he's like, well, so he basically decides to get involved in jazz and try to learn. He tries to learn about Princeton because clearly he did not go. So he's trying to learn as much as he can. So he arrives in Italy. He meets a young lady by the name of Meredith. So he meets a young lady by the name of Meredith while he's at the, I guess, the place where you show your passport and all that, checking in and all that. And she's rich too. She comes from a wealthy family. And she hears that someone say Greenleaf, so she thinks he's a Greenleaf. She asks him about it, and he basically says, yeah, I am a Greenleaf. This rice is good. This rice is really, really good. So, basically, let's try a biscuit. I can't eat too much biscuit because you know you get full. I love a good biscuit. Wow. So basically, he says, yeah, I'm a Greenleaf. Sorry about that, you guys. So he basically lets this young lady named Meredith, he lets her believe that he is, in fact, Dickie Greenleaf. So he shows up at the beach where Greenleaf is at with his girlfriend, Marge. It's so good. And basically, um, he runs into him. He runs to the beach shore and then he runs back as if, he's coming from the beach. And he's like, oh, hey, Dickie. And he's like, do we know each other? He's like, I went to Princeton. He's like, well, did I know you? And he's like, yeah, well, I knew of you, so you probably knew me. Which doesn't mean that, but that's what he said. And so, Marge, his girlfriend, she invites Dickie back to the house. And she invites Tom back to the house. And Tom is like, okay, I'll go to your house. Of course, that's his mission. And so he gets to the house. Well, before he gets to the house, he's walking up to go to the house, and he notices that Dickie is flirting with some girl and has her jump on his bike, and they take off together, and I guess he heads over to the house. When Dickie finally gets to the house, he's got this whole story about why he's late, about fishing. And Tom is sitting there thinking to himself, well, I know that's not what happened because I saw you take off with this girl. But he doesn't say anything. And Marge gets up to make him martinis. So, while Marge is making the martinis, Tom is telling basically Dickie what his talents are. That's so good. So Tom is telling Dickie what his talents are, and he said he's a talent for forging signatures, imitating voices. Basically, in a nutshell, Gotham sounds like a con man. So he's like, well, do an impression for me. And he impersonates his father, Dickie's father, the one he met. So basically, in that moment, he decides to reveal to Dickie that your dad sent me out here to try to bring you home. That's good. So he tells Tom, I'm never going back to where my dad is. Never. So they devise this plan to try to deceive Dickie's dad and take money from him and just string him along. So they're writing letters, telling the dad all kind of lies, sending money. And in the meantime, Tom moves in to Dickie's house. And him and Dickie, Tom and Dickie, they're hanging out. They're going to jazz clubs. They're doing all kind of stuff. He's convinced Dickie that he loves jazz, which is what kind of got him to stay around. So they're doing that. And so after a while of doing that, Vicky's inviting Tom to all kind of stuff. You know, we're going to be going skiing in the winter. We're going to be going here in the spring. You should come, Tom. You should come. And Tom's like, okay, great, great, great. And so after that, they're having good times. And then shows up one of Dickie's friends from Princeton, and his name is Freddie. Freddie gets there, and he's just, you know, arrogant guy, full of himself. But prior to Freddie coming, let me rewind. Prior to Freddie coming, the girl that Dickie was messing around with, they're out on the boat, and she ends up killing herself. Ooh, excuse me. She ends up killing herself because it seems like she has a level of jealousy for Dickie. So after she kills herself, we meet Freddie. And Freddie's a good friend. You know, he's from Princeton. He's, you know, rich, spoiled, arrogant, all that type of stuff. And so when Freddie comes along, Tom kind of starts to get dissed. And Tom has tried to come on to Dickie in the past. So if you rewind, Dickie was in the bathtub taking a bath, and Tom was there, and he was like, oh, the bath looks nice and warm. Can I get in there with you? And Dickie just kind of looked at him like, what are you talking about? But Dickie's like, okay, well, if you want to take a bath, he said, I'll get out. You can jump in if that's what you want to do, which I find kind of gross. I don't want to be sitting in nobody else's body fluids, but this is what Tom's request was. So that was kind of off-putting. So Freddie's there, and now that Freddie is there, Dickie is ignoring Tom. Basically, he doesn't really want as much to do with him. So Dickie decides, you know what, I'm going to hang out with Freddie for a bit. You can go sightseeing, go do what you whatever you're doing, and just do it by yourself. Sorry, you guys, about that. My son is very active today. I don't know what's gotten into him, but it is what it is. Right now, I have him here with me. So, I'm going to try to finish up this mukbang with my little boobs here. So, basically, he disses Tom and tells Tom, go sightseeing, go do whatever you want to go do. Me and Freddie are here chilling, enjoying ourselves. My son. And so he said, you know, you can borrow one of my jackets, because they were supposed to go shopping, but when Freddie came into town, that was like out of the picture. That was not happening anymore. So he's like, well, borrow one of my jackets. So Tom is in the room dancing and singing, looking at himself in the mirror, half dressed in Dickie's clothes. And Dickie walks in the room, and he's like, what are you doing? He's like, why do you have all my clothing on? Because he had a lot of his clothes on. He was like, oh, I was just messing around. He said, I thought you missed your train, which is probably why he was up there dressing and doing all that. He said, well, Dickie took me home. Freddie took me home in his car. And he was like, Freddie's here? And he's like, yeah, Freddie's here. And he's like, well, don't tell Freddie anything. I was just playing around. I was just joking. And he's like, okay. So the next day, they wake up. And clearly, Dickie told Freddie because Freddie's like, I would love to have your job, Tom. You basically live in Dickie's house, eat Dickie's food. The dad picks up the tab, and you spend Dickie's dad's money, and you do that all day. He said, whenever you get tired of your job, let me know because I'll take over. Which is kind of true. It's like, I don't know what he thought, they were doing, but it was weird. And it's like, eventually, this is probably going to have to end because you're not paying for anything. I would have been saving that dad's money and been like, this is not my life, but I'll get money I can. So Tom ignores that, but he feels awkward. And so they say, well, let's go sailing. So they're all out there sailing, and they're doing their thing. And, Tom is getting ignored on the boat. And, what's her name? Marge, Dickie's fiance, she sees him on the boat looking lonely because Dickie and Freddie are in the ocean water playing and stuff, having fun. And so Marge goes up to him and she says, I know how you feel. She said, when Dickie pays attention to you, you feel like you're on top of the world. And then when, excuse me, when he doesn't, you feel like nothing. And she said he does that a lot. And she said that's just with the boys. So obviously Marge is aware that Dickie sometimes is messing around. So Dickie gets back on the boat. Oh, and then Marge also informs Tom that he's not going to come to that winter trip because Freddie said it's not going to work because you don't know how to ski. And people who don't know how to ski, I guess, have to live in certain areas and be in certain lodgings. So clearly, Dickie didn't tell Tom because he was surprised. And so Marge felt bad, like, oh my God, I wish I didn't have to be the person to tell you this. But that's what happened. So after that, Dickie and Freddie come back to the boat, and they're talking about a trip they want to go to, like go to Rome. And Freddie tells Dickie, there's a lot of women out there, you have some sex, basically. And Marge overhears this, and she gets upset, and she goes to the bottom of the boat. And Dickie's like, well, let me handle her, because, she's upset based on what you said and based on what she knows I do. So he goes down to the bottom of the boat with her, and they're having sex. Tom is on the front part of the boat, and he's looking down at them, peeping, and Freddie's in the back, steering the boat. And Freddie's like, oh, are you enjoying peeping, Tom? He said, how's the peeping, Tom? How is it? You're looking. I can see that you're looking at my friend and his girl. And so Tom feels awkward, and he looks away. Tom is, so far at this point in the movie, he's lying. He's living a big lie. He's living a very two-faced situation. So it's a big mess. So they get back to the house and they look out the window. There's like this ceremony happening that happens in Italy. And they look out the window and there's a dead body floating in the water, and everybody runs to the body. Now, Dickie is watching this, and Tom and Marge, they're watching this from their balcony. So they're not down there where the ocean is. And it happens to be the girl that Dickie was messing around with, who is dead in the ocean. And so Dickie gets all upset and hot and bothered and walks away. And Tom's like, oh, I'll go talk to him. And Marge is like, no, I'll go talk to him, Booby. So he's like, no. She's like, I'll go talk to him. Like, because realistically, Tom is new to their lives. So it's like, why are you trying to be the one to comfort um, Dickie? You don't even know him like that. So after that, Dickie is playing the sax in the house, and Tom's like, I know about you and that girl. I saw you guys together, so I know all about it. He said, I'm not going to tell anybody. And he was like, what do you know? And he was like, well, I know. And he's like, well, did you know she was pregnant? And so the girl was pregnant, and Dickie said to Tom that the girl asked him for some money for some help, and he said no. Now, I think the girl wanted money for an abortion because where she lives, where she comes from, getting pregnant like that and not having a husband and all that, that's just looked, it's frowned upon. And so that's probably why she wanted to do that. But Dickie didn't help her. And so they moved on from there. So Dickie basically takes Tom to another like jazz club, and he's like, you didn't go to Princeton, did you? And Tom reveals, well, no, I didn't. He's like, I knew it. Me and Marge had a bet about if you really did. He said, you don't even like jazz, really. He said, you just like it because I like it. And he was like, well, I've grown to like it. I've grown to love everything about it. And I've grown to love everything about you and your life and what you do. And I'm like, and at this point, Dickie gets up and ignores him and starts talking about, I want to stop playing the sax and I want to start playing the drums. And I'm sitting there thinking, what about your relationship with Dickie made you feel like he was going to feel that way about you? I don't know I didn't see anything take place, but Tom is really getting obsessed with Dickie. So he tells wait one second, you guys. Okay. So Dickie takes Tom out, and before he takes him out, they're walking up and down the road of Italy. And he tells Tom, basically, we're going to have one more trip. It's going to be a jazz festival. We're going to say goodbye in style to each other because they said, this is going to be basically the end of us hanging out, basically. And Tom, of course, looks very sad about it. And so Dickie takes Tom on a boat ride because he said, this is how I found my home in where I'm living now. I took my boat out. I went around the shores, and the place I saw that I liked, I got it, basically, because he's got money like that. So they're out there, and Dickie is basically saying how, he's going to be marrying Marge, and he loves her, and Tom is like trying to tell him about a plan of coming back out to Rome and them just hanging out together because he has to go back because he ain't got no money. So Tom is basically saying, I'm going to go back home, gather money, and come back out here to hang out with you. I'm like, are you serious? So Dickie's like, no, I don't think that's going to work. He said, me and Marge are going to be getting married. And, it's just not going to work for me. I don't really want to do that, basically. And when he hears that Dickie's going to marry Marge, Tom says, well, how are you going to marry her? He said, well, I love Marge. He said, well, you're always with other women. He said, well, I love Marge. I'm going to be marrying her. And Tom says, you love me, but you're not going to marry me. And Dickie's like, I do not love you, Tom. I do not feel that way for you at all, Tom. I don't know what you're talking about. And he was like, yes, you do. He said, I know that moment we had in the tub. And he's talking about the tub moment that basically he was trying to, I think, come on to Dickie, but Dickie was not really there for that. And so he's talking about, oh well, I know you want to be with me and stuff like that. So basically, he's expressing his love to Dickie, and Dickie's like, no. And so he just starts talking about him and saying, oh, you just feel like you can use people and dispose of them. He said, and it's not right. And Dickie's like, okay, I'm done being on this boat with you. He starts trying to start it up. He said, I'm tired of you whining and you're a boring person. And he just starts laying it all out to Tom. And Tom is getting upset. And Dickie's in the midst of starting up the boat and talking crap about Tom. And Tom can't take it. So he grabs an oar and he hits Dickie in the face with it. And blood just starts coming down, coming out. Dickie decides to attack Tom. Tom fights him back. Dickie ends up back on the ground, on the boat, on his back. And Tom just bams that oar onto him until Dickie is dead. So Tom goes back to the house and he tells Marge that Dickie told him that he was leaving and to pack up his stuff and he didn't know how long. And Marge is like, well, why would he do that? What is he doing? And he's like, I don't know. So basically the whole time Tom is juggling his lies. He moves out of that place where Dickie lived and moves into this other rich place and he starts living as if he's Dickie. So he's using Dickie's name, his passport, using his money. And just doing all kinds of stuff. He runs into Meredith and he decides to go to the opera with her. And so sorry you guys. So my son, he's like sitting up but then he moves around and he slides down. So Tom decides to go to the opera with Meredith. This is the girl that he met at when he was doing his passport and stuff. This is her. So he basically goes to the opera with her and he runs into Marge because Marge is there. And he's like, hey Marge. Well, he's looking all clean and crisp too. Not how he was looking the whole time. He's looking more like Dickie. So Marge is like, have you seen Dickie? Is he here with you? And he's like, no. And so basically he's like, well, meet me at this coffee shop and I'll see what I can tell you about what I know about Dickie. So Meredith sees this, and at this point, he told Meredith that him and Marge aren't together anymore. Because keep in mind, Marge thinks Tom is Dickie. She's never heard him say he's anyone other than Dickie Greenleaf. So, Booby, you okay? Yeah. He's over here just being silly. So, basically, um, he tells Meredith to meet him at that same coffee shop, and but he tells her to meet him a little earlier. So when Marge is there and she sees, when Meredith gets there, because she gets there before Marge, and she sees Marge show up, she's like, okay, I don't want to be here because Dickie's coming, and this is obviously his woman, and I kind of gained feelings for him, but obviously it's not going to be anything. So she tries to encourage Meredith that there's nothing going on, that he loves her, and all that. So Marge leaves. While this is happening, Tom is watching from some area, and so he waits to see Marge walk away. Not Marge, but Meredith. And so then he goes down to meet with Marge and this guy that she's with. Oof. So he gets there and he tells her some story about, I don't know where Dickie is. I feel so terrible, but and Marge is like, well, I think Dickie's coming home based on what Meredith said to her. So she said, I'm going to go back home because I think Dickie's coming home. And Tom was like, oh, that's great. It's great relief. So Marge goes back home. Of course, Dickie does not show up. So Tom is basically living this double life. So Tom is inside of his nice new apartment that he bought with Dickie's money. And, well, he didn't buy it. He's renting it. And shows up at the door is Freddie. And Freddie's looking at him like, how are you living like this, doing it like this? You were not that type of guy. And so Freddie's like, well, where's Dickie? He's like, I don't know. He's somewhere. Oh. And so, what are you doing? Boo, boo. He's so cute. I'm sorry, you guys. Distraction. So he's like, I don't know where Dickie is. He's not here. I don't know. And so Freddie's leaving. He's going down the steps and he sees the maid and he's like, where is Mr. Dickie Greenleaf? And she's like, he's here. He's home. Which is basically Tom. And Tom is looking down while he's having this conversation from the steps. And the maid looks up and she's like, yes, there he is. Mr. Greenleaf, Tom. And so Freddie's like, okay, I get what's possibly going on. So he walks back up the steps, goes to the door, and is ready to confront Tom and ask some questions. And Tom bashes him over the head with a statue, like a, what do they call it? Like a bust of a person. So he bashes him over the head with that. Then he drags him to the car and takes him off. And some people are seeing him, but he's acting like, oh, he's so drunk. That's what Tom is acting like. Like, Freddie is so drunk when people see him. So then the next day, the police show up at his door, and they're asking him all kind of questions, which is understandably so, because this was the last place Freddie was seen. Yeah. So Tom is like, I don't know what happened. He left here drunk and drove off. And no one could basically tell him anything. Wait 1 second, you guys. So basically, he's telling the police, I don't know what happened. This one went down the wrong tube. And so they're investigating. They're asking him questions. He's like, I don't know. So, basically, the police are like, well, your fiance is downstairs. She'd like to talk to you. Well, I don't want to talk to nobody. I don't want to talk to nobody. So, basically, finally, the dad comes down and has a private detective there to go and investigate from America. Booby. Wait a second again, you guys. I'm so sorry. So, when Dickie's dad comes into town, the detective basically is investigating, and finally at the end of this investigation, Marge believes that it's Tom who did something to Dickie. That's what she believes. But the detective sits down and talks to Tom and reveals the fact that he does know that Tom did not go to Princeton, that he's not who he said he was, but but he also reveals the fact that Dickie has had a very troubled past. He's gotten into a lot of trouble. He's done a lot of bad stuff. Almost went to jail and arrested and all that. And so that's why his dad sent him to Italy. So the dad was like, basically the dad told the detective to ask Tom to just keep that a secret, to keep everything that happened quiet, and to basically the dad gives him a nice chunk of change to do that, and says thank you for your services and what you did. And oh, wait 1 second, you guys. So I'm sorry, you guys. I'm back. He's so funny. So let me hurry up and wrap this up. I've eaten a lot of chicken, and my son is like, it's me time. He was asleep, but as you can hear, he's awake. So basically, the dad leaves the money and takes off. And Marge is still angry, saying, I know it was you. I know it was you, Tom. And so Tom goes, what, booby? He just wants me to stop talking. So Tom goes and is leaving, booby. Wait a second, you guys. So, sorry about that. I don't know how many times I've paused, but that's mommy life, I guess. So, basically, after, this rice is good. After that whole scene happens, Tom leaves with the gentleman who was hanging out with Marge. And I guess they're kind of becoming lovers, because it's obvious that that guy is probably gay. And Tom, I guess he might be bisexual. I would guess that might be his position. So while they're on the boat, leaving, taking a little trip together, them two, who is on the boat but Meredith? And Meredith is like, oh, Dickie, because she still thinks he's Dickie. And she's like, oh, I haven't seen you, and I was upset last time I did see you. And she's like, are you here with, I forgot the guy's name, but it's the guy that Tom is there with. He's taking the trip with him. And she asks, are you there? Are you here with him? Have you seen him? And he's like, no, I haven't seen anybody. So he's like, well, can I meet up with you later? Because basically, he can't get exposed. So She's like, fine, and he kisses her. And so he goes to his room on the boat, and the guy he's with, he's like, I saw you kissing her, and you're acting like you don't want me to be here. You want to act like you're not here with me. And he's like, I just feel like I've been living a lie. And he said, I always thought it'd be great to be a fake somebody than a real nobody. And so he's like, I don't know what you're talking about, Tom. You're amazing. And so he was like, well, tell me some good things about Tom Ripley. This is what Tom says. And so the gentleman is telling him some good things about himself. And Tom decides to choke him out. While he's laying on the bed on his stomach, he chokes him out from behind. And that's the way the movie ends. Now, I don't know if Tom gets caught this time because he's killed someone else on this boat, on this trip. But that's the way the movie ends. And so it's a very good movie. There's parts I didn't really get to get into because I've been very hectic with my son. But on top of that, it is like I think it's like a 2 hour and 15-minute movie. So it's a kind of a long movie. It's in depth, but it's an excellent, excellent movie. Great story. It's a good movie. From scale to 1 to 10, I would give it a 10. It's more of a suspense type thriller type film. It's not scary. And it was great. I love it. I mean, this movie came out in 1999, and it still does well today. It's probably better than a lot of the movies that have come out lately. So I highly recommend it. Great acting, great story. Things happened in there I did not expect to happen. I don't know how many pieces of chicken I ate, but okay. I had 6 pieces of chicken. That's a lot of chicken. It was a great movie. Great twist. I don't know if he got caught, but it seemed like there's a chance he was. So without further ado, I think I'm going to be calling it a day, or where I'm at, a night. Let me do my touch up. Okay. And I've got to get back to my son. I really apologize if any of you guys were not happy that, he was in the background doing what he was doing. But it's just what you got to do. So, he's making noises now. Okay, so I'm going to say good night to you guys. Have a good one. Stay safe. Stay blessed. And until next time, you guys, have a good one. Bye.